or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to this course on how to use economics in natural hazard management. My name is Veronique Florec. I am a research economist at the University of Western Australia. I have been working with the Bushfire Natural Hazard CSE for several years, and with the predecessor as well, Bushfire CSE. And Abbie, you're facilitated today. I'll be the one presenting the course for this session, next session, and a little bit of the fourth session. And we also have Dr. Abbie Rogers today, who will be taking care of the chat, and she will be facilitating session 3. Abbie, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and welcome. So I'm co-director of the Centre for Environmental Economics and Policy at UWA, and also part of the Bushfire and Natural Hazards CRC. And you'll hear a bit more from me in session 3, where we'll be talking about how we integrate non-market values into the tool that Vero is going to demonstrate to you today.
In this session today, we'll concentrate on introducing the tool. It's a tool basically that allows you to do simple and relatively quick economic analysis. So it's basically, it gives you a good understanding of what data is needed, how it is used in an economic analysis, what results you get, and how to use those results. And also it performs a sensitivity analysis for you in the background, but we'll go a little bit in detail on each of the components of the tool and what it does, so that you can basically get a good understanding of what is happening, how the benefit analysis is conducted by the tool. So in this session is more introduction of the tool itself and a big kind of overview with an example, and we'll go together through it. We'll go through the example together, and yeah, we will get basically kind of to know the tool and what it does. In the second session, we'll go a little bit more in detail into what is the tool is doing in the background, the things that you actually don't see that it is calculating. And we're kind of going to calculate them ourselves so that you just can see exactly everything that is happening in the background and get a better understanding of how a benefit cost analysis is conducted. In the third sessions, we'll have a look at how to integrate intangibles. We call them non-market values. So things that are not exchanged in markets, like biodiversity, life, the environment, mental health, all those kind of things that are intangible, but basically they don't have a market value. We call them non-market values, and see how we can integrate them into this type of analysis using dollar values. Today, you will need the tool open. In a moment, I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the tool. So the file is called East Session 1. And you just have it open. Maybe you have also the instructions printed or on a second screen, whichever is more comfortable for you. You will be basically seeing everything on the screen, in the Zoom screen, as I go through it. So it will be quite relatively easy to follow basically what we're doing. And there is also a video course that supports a little bit this, course as well. There is a video course with a series of 10 videos that explain the principles and in very basic terms how we apply economic analysis to the management of natural hazards. Also going through kind of a benefit cost analysis example, which is a good way to understand other types of economic analysis as well. So to start, the purpose of creating this tool is actually to help people get a good grasp on economic analysis and how to apply it to a natural hazard management context, and is to actually provide kind of a very simple and at the same time robust enough tool that will help people in the natural hazard management space to prioritize different mitigation options for natural hazards. And so it provides a quick overview. Is a screening tool. So the idea is basically to understand from this, what are the data requirements, where do we have sensitivities, or where do we have maybe how much confidence we can have in the results, and we'll see that through a sensitivity analysis. And then from that, you can decide which additional data you might want to collect if you want high confidence in your results, or you can also decide what options really deserve developing business cases for, so that you can then have a conversation with policymakers or Treasury from the business cases that you develop. So in today's example, we have a bushfire mitigation example in the wildland urban interface, which is kind of the area that is a little bit at the edge of towns, that is a mix of human property, houses, flammable vegetation, sometimes rural areas. So is a challenging area to manage because of how all of the different assets and all of the different land uses are intermingled. So we have three different fuel reduction mitigation options to evaluate, plus an education option. So to start, press here on the start button, and then you should open this parameters tab or the parameters sheet. And here in the drop-down menu where it says number of mitigation strategies to be evaluated, there is already the number 4, but we need to select it again. Select the number 4, and you should have a dialog box appearing where we will insert the names of the mitigation options. So in the first box, click here at the top and insert landscape burns. Then click in the second box and insert WUI for wild and urban interface burns. Then click in the third box and insert private fuel reductions, and click on the fourth one and insert the word education. Now press OK at the bottom. And so now we see the 4 mitigation options that we'll be evaluating, and click on next. So now here appears the first section of the tool that will require data. So in here, we're going to insert all the information that the tool needs to conduct the economic analysis, to conduct the benefit cost analysis. And this is usually the information that you require to be able to actually conduct a benefit cost analysis. So in the first box here, we're going to insert what we call capital cost. There are other terms that are used for this. It could be establishment cost or construction cost. It depends on the mitigation option that you have. They will involve different things. For example, if we're talking about prescribed burning, it could be the amount of money that is necessary to invest to be able to set up the program, to get it started. Anything that involves planning, anything that happens before actually people go out there and conduct the burns. So those will be the capital cost. If it is, for example, a dam that is being built to prevent floods in an area, it will be the cost of constructing that dam. So it's basically everything that happens at the start before the mitigation option is in place, and to actually permit that mitigation option to be implemented. If you actually hover over the little information icon and you click on it, then you have this dialog little pop-up little thingy that basically tells you the definition of capital cost. So basically it's anything that you need to get a program established, to get it to start. So usually this happens only at the beginning and sometimes over a few years at the start of a mitigation option, and then it doesn't happen after a while. Then after that, it's just basically maintenance. So here for the first mitigation options, the way we'll go through this tool to actually kind of speed things up a little bit is that I've basically coded in a way that it will insert a lot of the data automatically for you that is in the exercise sheet, in the exercise document. So we'll insert all the information for landscape burns only, and then I'll guide you through how to insert the data automatically that it has been preloaded into the tool already. So here for landscape burn, the capital cost are 1,040,000. And then the spread of capital cost, if you have a look in page 4 of your of the exercise for session 1, it says that these are spent completely in the first year. So you could have here a division of if here it wasn't all spent in the first year, if it was, for example, 20% in year 1, 20% in year 2, and it's spread over the whole 5 years, it will be 20% in each of these boxes. But what is important here is that at the end, all of this has to sum, the sum has to be 100% or 1. So it has to be, the sum has to be 100%. So it's basically where it's a proportion only of the cost that will happen in a particular year. So for example, a dam, is not constructed in one single year. Usually it takes 5, sometimes 10 years to build a dam. So then in that case, you will have to actually divide those costs. And this tool, I've had some feedback already from previous users that this number of years needs to be extended past 5, because 5 might not be enough actually to cover how the spread, for example, of the cost of a dam or big infrastructure projects. So this will be all addressed for the final version of the tool that will be available at the end from the Bushfire Natural Hazards CRC website. So now go have a look at this green button here that is on the right, the light green button, and click on it. And then that automatically inserts the data for the other options. So scroll down now to what we call annual operation and maintenance costs. So these are recurrent costs. It's anything that you have to pay every year for, and that will continue no matter what, is what we call annual operation and maintenance costs. So for here, for example, is the equipment, the staff, all the resources needed to run year by year a prescribed burning program, for example, or the facilitators of an education program. Here you could also include volunteers, and costing volunteers has been researched enough now that we can actually add the cost of volunteers as well that you actually need every year for running different operations. For a dam or a levee or any other infrastructure works, it will be, for example, the maintenance cost of those infrastructure works. So anything that basically you need to do every year is what we will have here as operational maintenance costs. So for the landscape burns, operational maintenance cost is 5,160,000. And it says here in page 4, at the very bottom of page 4, that the operational maintenance costs are incurred right from the start. So from year 1 for all of the options. So here I just will type year 1 and then go to the right, have a look at the light green button and click on it so that the rest of the information is uploaded automatically. So now scroll down to the next section, which is the benefits of mitigation strategies. And so here what we need, the benefits are not estimated yet, right? So that's what the tool is going to do for us. But then we need to tell the tool, okay, when do the benefits start to appear? So if we're implementing, prescribed burns, the benefits most of the time are immediate. So they start straight away after you reduce the fuels in the landscape. If there is a fire in the next fire season that comes through and goes through that particular patch that has been prescribed burn, then there is a chance that that will reduce the intensity of the fire. And so here for prescribed burning and for education, if people actually take the education into account straight away and then go and do their own plans for fire within their houses, so that will be kind of immediate. But in some of the cases, for example, if we build a dam and it takes 10 years to build the dam, well, maybe after 5 years is halfway up, or maybe 70% of the dam has been built. So it might already provide some of the protection, not full protection as we are expecting it to, but it might already provide some protection to the catchment. So in that case, we will need to actually tell the tool here, okay, the benefits start to appear around year 5 or year 6, because the dam is a little bit built, it's not complete, the works are not complete, the dam is not all the way up to where it is supposed to go. But part of it, if there is a lot of rain and then the creek actually floods and then comes into the catchment that we're trying to protect, well, the dam will protect it a little bit already. So we need to put that percentage, what proportion of the benefits that we're expecting are likely to be realized in different years. That's a good question. I think it will get partly answered a little bit later. I mean, partly the sense of, it was a good question that like the previous group that we ran the course with had exactly that question, and wanted to know exactly, okay, well, but we have, different events and we have, they have different probabilities of occurring. And so how do you actually go about, estimating, exactly the effects of mitigation for different, for those different floods, and how do you put them into the tool? In the next, not the next tab that we're going to open, but the following one, which is the one that accounts for the effects of mitigation, I think, and I hope that answer will be, that question will be answered. So it is accounted for, to answer the question, it is accounted for, but not quite here. not quite here in the sense of we don't deal in this tool. This is already annualized. The tool is already deals with annualized data. What does that mean? So if we have, for example, a flood that occurs, is a 1 in 100-year flood, and that we know from hydrological modeling what damage it could cause. We first convert that to an annual basis, and for the same for all other types of event, a 1 in 20, a 1 in 50, a 1 in 100, 1 in 200, etc. And we convert all the potential damages for all different types of event into an average annual damage. And then we will insert them into another tab, another sheet that will appear later, so that the tool can take that information into account. But it's already in an annualized basis. So it is taken into account, but not here. So here is basically we're telling the tool, not all the benefits might be realized straight from the start. And that's just important for the tool to know, because if it expects that a dam, if we don't tell that to the tool, it will assume that from the very first year, even if the dam is not even built and is not constructed, all the benefits are starting to appear straight away. So this is what we need to tell the tool when they are going to start. So that is something that you will get from historical data. Is usually is something here for this particular example. I've selected an arbitrary number of when most of the time, depending on how you run your prescribed burning program, but most of the time the benefits are immediate to the application of prescribed burning. But then it's not the case for all prescribed burns, it's not the case for all types of mitigation options. Then it really does, in bushfire, the difficult part, it depends on where the fire starts, how likely is a fire to actually encounter that particular burn. So it does get complicated then, but you usually will use historical data to be able to tell when usually the benefits are realized, when you have seen over the past years, as some of the programs might have been run, when those have been realized. In some cases, there might have been no prescribed burning done at all in some areas in previous years. So you might have to take information or data from a similar area somewhere else that you could use as information. So this is something that is not straightforward. There is not a rule of thumb to say exactly when the benefits start to appear. I think is a good option here will be to talk to experts in the field that will be able to tell when the mitigation options could actually start generating those benefits, if it will be more immediate or if it will take a few years. But it's not a straightforward, there is not a straightforward rule of thumb. These numbers are not necessarily what generally applies to prescribed burning. It depends on many other things. I've taken them simple numbers just to kind of illustrate how the tool works. But the data, just remember, the data is very much for these examples and does not necessarily apply generally to all cases of mitigation for bushfires or all cases of mitigation for floods, as we will see in the following sessions. Yes, no, and that's a very good point as well. So I guess I think a few of these questions would probably be answered as well in the effect of mitigation. We are really dealing here with annualized benefits. What does that mean? So we are imagining what the whole program, not just is a particular option here, but is almost evaluating the mitigation options from the perspective, if we actually implement landscape burns over the next 30 years, and if we actually implement them in the way that we actually want to, and we assume that we're successful in doing so, what will be the benefits that we will get from the program every year? And so that will in itself mean that for those types of vegetation where the benefits kind of are reduced over time because the vegetation grows back up again, it basically means that we will be successful in treating those areas again when the time comes that the risk has increased to a level that it needs to be treated again. So that's a good point. No, the tool does not take into account those kind of small, very subtle details that apply to different mitigation options. It basically takes everything on an annualized basis. So because of that, we kind of put that to the side, not to the side, but we take it into account, but it's just in a different way, assuming that, you know, on a landscape, kind of from a landscape perspective, the program will deliver a certain amount of benefits.
That makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, so I'll think of it as from the program perspective rather than the individual burns.
Yes, that's right. It's more from all of the landscape burns, and all of in here will be all of the wild and urban interface burn. It's very much a high level kind of analysis, and this is a screening tool. The purpose here is basically to kind of have a screening of the different mitigation options to be able then to do a full analysis of those that have the highest potential to provide the highest benefits. So the screen tool gives you already a lot of information, and we'll see later as well on about what additional information it might be really, really good idea to collect in order to have more confidence in the decisions, or more confidence in the benefits that we could get from our mitigation options. So it just gives you, is a screening process, but it's quite high level still. And those details then will come into later, and they're kind of outside of the scope of the tool, where you then will go and do a very much more detailed analysis with possibly a lot more information, depending on what you get, you know, as a result from the screen tool, which will give you, you will see later, more towards the results and sensitivity analysis. It gives you already a lot of information. And just, you know, keep in mind that these numbers here and all of the numbers that we have inserted in the tool are very much for educational purposes only. I mean, we try to actually make them, you know, sometimes close-ish to reality, you know, depending on which area you're doing this, you know, the numbers could be very different. But we also tweak them, and you will see later, you know, in the exercise, the next exercise in session 2 and in session 3, we kind of tweak them to actually get the results a little bit that we wanted, more for educational purposes, because they've raised the results that we then got with those tweaks. They've raised new questions, and then they will allow us to kind of explain a little bit better some of the concepts that are really important to understand when we are, you know, conducting this type of analysis, economic analysis of different mitigation options for natural hazards. So that's why a lot of it, you know, might sometimes seems a little bit kind of far-fetched, and some of them, you know, we try to get them as close as we can to reality, but it's very much tweaked and, you know, modified for the purpose of the exercise. So now we have to decide the length of the analysis. How long, for how many years do we want to evaluate these mitigation options? And again, this is not a straightforward answer of how many years to use. There is not necessarily a clear rule of thumb. For some large infrastructure works, yes, we could potentially choose the number of years that we think that particular infrastructure is going to last for. So say we think that this dam has a life, an expected life of 60 years, then we will use 60 years to evaluate the mitigation option. If we think this program could last for 10 years, then we, in that case, only use 10 years as the number for the length of the analysis. But again, it's not a straightforward answer. There is not really a rule of thumb that says you have to run for this particular case an analysis this long, for this particular case an analysis this long. So here we have selected some numbers that we think, you know, will make sense for this particular example. But again, you have to, these kind of decisions that also affect the results, they need to be discussed in advance, and then we can have a look later how they affect the results. To see if we need to choose something different. So if I put for a dam only 5 years for my analysis, it will look like an option that doesn't generate any benefits because it hasn't had any time to generate benefits, and it will only be extremely high cost. So in that case, then you will immediately will show that it's not a viable option because it has very negative results. Basically, I'm just wondering if this is my computer. Oh no, it's someone else's computer maybe. Because oh good. So yeah, so basically is depending on the number of years that we choose, it might actually show that there are not enough there is not enough time for the mitigation option to show what are the benefits that it actually generates. So you're very right there, Farah, that if we have a dam and we only put 5 years for the analysis, there won't even be time for the dam to produce benefits for us to actually evaluate here the mitigation option. And so, yeah, it takes some reflection. Yeah.
There's another question related, which is about whether or not you can compare different options with different time lengths in the analysis, or how you would do that.
That is a brilliant question. No, you cannot straight compare option that will last for 30 years with an option that will last for 15 years with an option that will last 20 years. You cannot, it's comparing apples with bananas. So far, this tool only allows for all options to have exactly the same length of time. But if you have different times, so if you actually think that different mitigation options require different lengths of the analysis to be able to evaluate them, in that case, you will kind of have to bring them all to the same length of time. And there is a complicated actually process and calculations to be able to do that. If this is something that you would actually like to have a look more, you would like to look into, we can do a little bit of that in session 4. Unfortunately, because the tool does not do that kind of, even in the background, it just basically so far is limited in that sense that you can only do one length of analysis. You will have to do the options, one version of the tool. You do the 30 years, for example, for one option, and open an entirely different version of the tool, do it for, may say, 15 years for another option, and then have a look at the results and bring them both together. You have to bring them to the same kind of length of analysis, but there is a particular way of doing that, and it's not that easy. So yeah, we can have a look at that if you do choose to, but just do know that if different mitigation options have different length of analysis, you cannot compare them. You cannot compare the results between them just as you see them from an analysis of 15 years and an analysis of 30 years. We're looking at entirely different things. But it's a little bit outside of the scope of the first 3 sessions. But we can look at that in session 4 if, you know, the majority thinks that is something that we would like to have a look at. To be honest, I think, yeah, that's a good question. I think I will probably use a longer one just because your program is not likely just to stop after 12 years and then you won't do anything else. You will probably go look for longer. It is here at the scale of the whole case study area, whichever your case study area is. So if you're looking at your regional, if you're looking at a region, a particular region for your analysis, or if you're looking at the state, it could be actually at the state level in that case, or you could be looking at a particular, well, you could be looking possibly a particular patch, but here, because it really is a high level tool, is a screening tool that really works at a higher level to actually tell you, okay, which mitigation options do you want? It is worth going and having a lot more, you know, having a look a lot more deeper into. So it's because it's a screening tool, is still a high level. And so, you know, for example, if you have a prescribed burning that, you know, will after 12 years, you know that the effects of those burns will be significantly reduced, and then you will be actually going back to those areas again to kind of restart the process. Let's say that you will take, for example, a 36-year period, right? Like just to make it easier in the mind, so that we'll multiply that by 3. So that's 3 times that you're running kind of the whole program in a way in your landscape, and that you're actually going through all of the patches that are needed. So if you think about the benefits, your benefits in year 1 will be quite high, and then year 2, year 3, year 4, and they will go, and you know, and at year 12 they will be much lower. But that's for a particular patch, right? It's not at the landscape level. So at the landscape level, your benefits will actually possibly, I mean, they will fluctuate, yes, but they might stay quite close to a certain line. And we actually take that line as our average. And even, let's say that even if you had a landscape and what you did was pretty much prescribe burn these patches once, and then you leave them alone for 12 years. So your benefits will go down over the years, and after 12 years, you go back and then, treat them again, and then they go back up again and they go down. What you will do in that case, because we're dealing on an annualized basis, you will actually then take an average and average all the benefits for all the years. So instead of having the benefits going like this, you will basically average them over the period that you will get those benefits, and have something that will tell you on average every year, this is the level of benefits that we get. Some years we get more, some years we get a lot less, but on average, this is what we expect. And so that kind of time subtlety is not taken into account in this tool, because it's at a very high level that we're evaluating everything. So we're dealing a lot with averages. And you see later that we did so much in averages that we put all of the events into an average annual damage basis, because that's the best way to kind of go about looking at things from a high level perspective. But then later on is when you go into detail into each of the options and have a look more at which data is important to collect for different parts of the analysis. So yeah, it's I think a bit of a tricky it's a tricky thing to deal with, and economic analysis, a lot of the times we deal with these averages because they give us a lot of information anyway to start with, but then later on, we have to go into a little bit more detail. But the tool would kind of guide you into what details you really need to go into for being able to get a more accurate information on the value for money that you can get from a particular mitigation option. That's basically kind of what we're getting from here. It's something that you will determine yourself. Okay. So now here for the discount rate. So now what is the discount rate? And I'm just going through insert this information, and then we'll go out, take a little break, and then come back for the rest. So the discount rate basically reflects the fact that as humans, we value money today and having it today more than the money coming in the future. So for example, if we have, if I ask someone, what would you prefer? That I give you $100 today, or would you prefer I give you $110 in the future? They might say, no, I want $100 today. And if I ask them, well, how about $130 in 1 year versus $100 today? They say, no, $100 today. Maybe if I go up to, okay, how about $150 in 1 year? Or do you want 100 today or 150 in 1 year? They might then decide, oh, okay, well, in that case, I'll wait for 1 year and I'll take that $150 in 1 year. So everyone will be different. Every single person on the planet will have a different answer to that. And that's with small amounts. With larger amounts, the answer will be different. If I say, would you prefer 1 million today, or would you prefer $1,100,000 in the future? They might say, oh, I want the $1,100,000 in the future straight away. But they did say no to the $110 in the future. It's the same change. It's just a 10% change. From 100 to 110, we have a 10% change. From 1 million to 1,100,000, we have 10% change. But people might actually change the way they think about these rates of preference. We call this the rate of time preference for money, depending on the amounts. So everyone on the planet will have a different answer for different amounts. And no one will actually, it's a very subjective thing, so no one will have basically the same opinion on this. Not even economists. Yes.
Sorry, Vera, there was a question in the chat box, but Abbie, I believe, has replied.
Oh, okay, cool. Just in case if the question is still hanging afterwards, let me know. It might just be good to actually, just in case for everyone also to have a look at the chat, if there are questions that you might also have, and to have a look at, what is being answered there. But so the discount rate is basically saying, if we value having money now, what would be a rate of change? So what would be the rate at which money will have to increase for me to think that money today, money in 1 year, money in 2 years, and money in 3 years is exactly the same? And it's like for me to be indifferent, completely indifferent to receiving this amount of money today or this amount of money in the future. So that's one thing. But the other thing, because we're trying to do this for the whole of society, so which rate do we use? And so I'll show you maybe a little bit later in session 2 or session 4, a very interesting article that went, like a very famous economist, he went and asked, 2,500, very influential economists around the world, what do you think should be the discount rate to use? And the answers varied all the way from 0 to 20%. And it's just incredible that, not even economists can agree amongst themselves as to what we should put here. So what do we do if we have no clue, basically, really what we should put? Usually the discount rate is close enough to the interest rate, just because it's kind of telling us a lot of times we're kind of indifferent to money in the future if we know that we can put it, invest it somewhere and have it gain, over the years. But, in this case, we're in a period that is kind of like a bit unprecedented with extremely low interest rates, but the discount rate that we usually use is a little bit higher. Why? Because the Australian government and different jurisdictions have slightly different recommendations, but the Australian government and most of the jurisdictions generally recommend a discount rate of 7%. Sometimes for some infrastructure works, they recommend 4%. But and 7%, you could argue, wait a minute, with nearly 0 interest rate these days, 7% is way too high. And you will be right. It's debatable whether this 7% is still kind of a valid number to use. But for that purpose, they recommend to do sensitivity analysis and to actually change this number and have a look at your results again, just to see how they change. And so we will do that later, and I'll show you how this tool basically provides you with a very good sensitivity analysis all the way from 0 to 20%, so that way you kind of are 100% sure that no matter what discount rate you choose, that you have the confidence that your results are not going to change if you actually see that the results are showing you that. If they're showing you, oh, but if you change it a little bit, they might change, then you have to actually really think about this very carefully. We will see that later when we have a look at the results. There is a particular result that's basically showing us what we call the internal rate of return. And it's basically kind of at which rate you are gaining your benefits kind of thing. But if that is actually lower than your discount rate, is what it's telling you is that you don't want to go through this particular project, or you don't want to invest in this mitigation. We'll see that a little bit later. So I don't want to get too much ahead of myself, but yes, it does matter, because basically we could be borrowing money to still then go ahead with the project. But here, it's kind of telling us, no, don't do that, because your benefits, don't increase at the rate that you want. So yes, Abbie, would you like to
yes,
add on to that?
There's another related question just about how the discount rate is basically chosen. Is it related to behavioural or emotional decisions by people, or is it based on numbers elsewhere? So I think it's worth talking just a bit about reflecting on how it sort of reflects the opportunity cost, and in that sense is related to how interest rates or cash rates are set in that sense. And given the changes in that, we have seen changes internationally where other governments are recommending using lower discount rates than we have done historically. So the UK Treasury Department, for example, has moved to using, I think, a 3% rate.
Yeah, exactly. So you will see when we see the results why this matters and how sensitive the results can be to the discount rate, but because it's basically affecting all the results of all the years in the future for 30 years. So because it's doing that, because we're taking the results from 30 years in the future and breaking them back into the present using this, you will see how we do that more in detail in session 2, but today we won't go in detail too much into that. But you'll see a little bit more in session 2 as to why it impacts all those, basically all the benefits for over 30 years. If that is happening, then the discount rate that we choose is going to impact all of our calculations, and it does have a significant impact on the results. So we'll see a little bit when we get to the results why we actually want to have a look at this discount rate very much in detail. And we always want to conduct sensitivity analysis, but definitely sensitivity analysis at discount rate. So that's the recommendation of the Australian government, is to choose a discount rate of 7%. and do sensitivity analysis at 3% and at 10%. That's the recommendation. I don't know if, with today levels of interest rate, if they will eventually change their recommendation as they have done in the UK. Hopefully they will, because the 7% is very questionable these days. But then, it's just to show that it's not a straightforward decision either. It's just all of these parameters, they affect the results of the analysis, and is not there is not a rule of thumb that says you should use for this particular type of analysis this discount rate. Is something also that generates a discussion.
And sorry, Vera, I'll just add that this is where it becomes really important that when you guys are running this tool, that you play with different discount rates to see how that affects the outcome of the benefit cost analysis. Because at the moment, there is a move, and certainly UK Treasury, for example, are now recommending using, I think, a 3% discount rate. So internationally, it's not consistent. And so that 7% is becoming more and more questionable.
So now click on the red green button next. And this opens the values sheet. So here is where we're going to insert the value of each of the assets that are at risk. So we have here market values. What we call the market values are the tangible assets. And here below, if you click on show non-market values, this will have a table where we will insert non-market values or intangible, the value of intangible assets in dollars. But for the moment, just keep it hidden. And we'll only look at in this session and in session 2 at market values or tangible assets. And from session 3, we'll start introducing non-market values. So what do we put here? What value do we put for residential buildings, commercial buildings, bridges, or anything else that we have here? The value that we insert is what it will take to reinstate the asset to its original state before the hazard damaged the asset. So for example, if it is a residential building, if it is a house, we're talking about a house, it will be how much will it cost to rebuild that house, and how much will it cost me to replace all the contents of everything that was destroyed inside the house. So it's what we call reconstruction cost. It's not how much is the house is selling for, because that has the price of the land embedded in it. It's actually how much will it cost me to rebuild that house and replace all the contents. The land hasn't gone anywhere. Arguably, yes, there is maybe if there has been a flood or a bushfire going through an area, it could be that the price of the land goes lower for a little bit, but generally after only a few years, and you'd be surprised how short it is, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised, you know how short it is, people actually tend to forget about these events very quickly. And the value of land, if it was reduced right after an event, it usually tends to go back up to where it was before in almost no time. So people tend to forget about the events very quickly, to the complacency kind of effect sets in, and after 10 years, everyone has forgotten about the event. So we do not include the price of the land here, because the land stays there. Most of the time, it keeps its price. So we look at reconstruction cost. How much will it take me to rebuild that bridge and have it exactly the same that it was before the event damaged it? There is also another debate, of including betterment, or actually, improving the asset and making it even better than what it was before. But ideally here we'll put, if you want to include that, that's fine. It will be basically the reconstruction cost after an event has destroyed that particular asset. Yes, you will have to ideally include all of that in this box here, for example, that I am inserting. How much in the hectares that were burned, or in the area that was burned by the bushfire, or that was destroyed by the flood or the cyclone, or anything, how much will it take not only to get this particular crop back to where it was before, that might take a few years, And it's the same for livestock. It's the same for a lot, like fruiting trees. It might take years to be able to actually get them there. So you will include everything in here, how long it will take to actually be able to get that there. The problem here is that in the tool, we look at an annual damage. So you'll see that in the next section, in the next sheet. We're looking at annual damage. So you will have to convert that to an average annual damage. And there is a technique to actually do that. But yes, it is actually quite complicated to actually be able to know exactly, everything that is lost here, because it's more than just the crop of that particular year. Is how much will it cost to bring back this particular area producing what it was producing before. And that's a lot more than just the crop that was lost in that particular moment for that particular event. Very true. And so how much will that cost the farmer? How much will that cost an industry having that soil damaged for years after the bushfire or the flood or the natural hazard has been through that area? So it's very difficult to actually do that. That said, most of the time, the only data that we have available is the crop that we have lost. So a lot of the times we will include here the value of the crop that has been lost. In some cases, maybe in vineyards, it has been estimated a few times before, how long and how much it will take to actually get the vineyard producing similar grapes to what it was producing before, although in some cases, it's extremely high. But for example, I've seen estimate of $60,000 per hectare to be able to get a hectare of vineyards to produce what it was producing before being destroyed by bushfires. So it will, a lot of the times here, depend on what data you have available. And ideally, you will include all of that, everything that was truly lost, and that you will need actually to spend some money to recover and put again at the same state that it was before the natural hazard event. But it's not always that easy. That's a very good point, that that will be included in the guidelines for this tool, mentioning those things that, usually this is the kind of data that we have available, but hey, think about all of these other things that are also lost when a bushfire or a flood or any natural hazard goes through this area. There is a lot more than the simple crop for that particular year. So it's true. And we here you see only direct damages. We haven't even, talked about indirect damages, which are, for example, business interruption, services interruption, basic needs interruption. So there are a lot of other things that also are disrupted that sometimes is very difficult to include them in economic analysis, simply because it's very difficult to get data on those. But the more we include, the more accurate results we will have. But so a lot of this data is sometimes quite difficult to source. I have suggested in page 7 of your exercise a few data sources that could be actually quite good to actually go and explore for actually be able to insert information here. And so we have, from previous analysis that we have done, often come across sometimes not very similar, but most of the time similar enough values that could get you started with the analysis. And we have here inserted them in these default values. So if you click on this light gray button, it inserts a set of values here for these assets that are kind of those values that we have come across often enough. And notice that for vineyards here, because I have done that analysis for the Southwest of Western Australia often enough, I have been able to actually source the amount of dollars per hectare that it will cost to reinstate a vineyard back to its original state after it has been destroyed by bushfires. And so here we can also include other items, that have not been included here, notably, for example, indirect impacts. So indirect impacts is one of those that is really hard to source information on as well. So all the flow-on effects. So for example, some businesses might have had to close. Maybe they didn't get the produce that they were trying to get is not available anymore. So they actually have no business. Or there might be some power poles destroyed. So there is an electricity outage. So because of that, some businesses might have had to close. And so we have other impacts as well that are not actually basically listed here. So you could add them here in other items. we're going to add one just so that you actually kind of get the idea of how we are actually adding other items, and we're going to add mining. So instead of item 1, we replace that by mining. And here the value of mining in page 8 of the equipment at risk in the site is 7,800,000. So type 7,800,000, and this is the dollars for the equipment. I think equipment doesn't have an E. Or is it? Cool. So we've added a new asset. And so now that we have the value of our assets and we've added another one, we click on the blue, dark blue button that says next, and that opens a new sheet, the effect mitigation sheet, with some information that also the user needs to insert. So here is where we need to actually tell the tool, and this is what is always, we always do the process in benefit cost analysis. We have a baseline scenario. So this is one scenario, and then we have a look at the mitigation that were implemented, and we compare the mitigation to the baseline scenario that we decided. Deciding on what our baseline scenario is going to be, or we call it the baseline scenario, or also the counterfactual, is also not necessarily an easy process. You have to be very clear about what you're going to compare things to. So here we have as a title, average annual damage without mitigation. In reality, you could have no mitigation at all. So nothing, no investment, nothing whatsoever. So if you have, for example, no prescribed burning at all, it will be an area where the fuel loads will be extremely high, because if you haven't prescribed burned ever in that area, is only, let's say, fires like bushfires, that uncontrolled burns, basically uncontrolled bushfires that will have reduced the fuels in that area. So that could be one scenario. But we could also have as another scenario, whatever we're implementing at the moment, that is the scenario that we want to have as a basis, and then we'll increase or change the mitigation that we're already doing. So that could be another baseline scenario as well. It doesn't necessarily mean no mitigation at all. It simply means this is my baseline scenario. It can be no mitigation, or it can be before I implement any of these strategies. It can be one of those. So here I'm going to insert the average annual damage. What does that mean? So on average, all different types of bushfire events, what will they on average destroy per year? So that means from the very small fires to the very large fires. And of course, small fires that don't destroy much happen more often, and medium-sized fires that destroy a little bit more, they happen less frequently. Very, very large fires that destroy a lot, they happen with even less frequency. So we have to take that into account. There is a video in the video series that was sent in the email, the first email that was sent to you with the material. There is a video that explains how we actually go about calculating from the destruction that we know from small fires, medium fires, large fires. This is how much destruction each of these happen, each of these cause, and I know with what probability they occur, how to actually use that information to then estimate average annual damage. So we're not going to go into detail here on that. Just know that usually this is taken from either historical data, or it is taken from simulations, for example, where you create a scenario in your landscape and then simulate different bushfires to know exactly what could happen. For floods, for example, it can be, you will need hydrological models to be able to tell you where the water will go and how much it will flood, depending on different scenarios. So we will insert here just what our scenario, our baseline in this particular context, and for this particular scenario is no mitigation at all, basically zero investment. So that means that the damage could be quite high if we don't have any mitigation in place whatsoever. So in page 9, we have a table that tells us the different levels of damage for each of the assets. So it's 20 houses or 20 residential buildings per year on average, 3 commercial and 1 industrial. And we just leave those 3 and then talk about, insert the reductions. So if we implement landscape burns, this number here will be reduced by 40% on average. If we implement landscape burn, these commercial buildings will be reduced by 35%. So in this area here, we're going to insert the percentage, how much we think this particular mitigation option is going to reduce this damage once this one is implemented. And so here, 30%. So now let's click on this green button, data, to actually insert the rest of the information. Yeah, that's a good point, and that's a very good question. Thanks for that question. That it is true that if you don't have, I mean, you already have underestimated value at risk, and on top of that, you might have underestimated the impacts before you, apply mitigation to the area. That will result in a kind of a double time underestimation of the impacts on agriculture. So basically what will happen is that you will definitely see that if your results are showing you that you will want to go for one mitigation option or another, you know that your estimates on the impacts of bushfires on agriculture will be definitely a lot lower than what they should be. But the tool allows for having a look at what would happen if those costs are much higher than what you were able to actually have as an included, that you were able to include here. So it allows for sensitivity analysis to increase the values by a lot. And then you will be able to actually see if it is important to actually, for selecting your mitigation option, if it is crucial that you go and collect more data on that, or with the data that you have, if it was kind of enough to be able to rank the mitigation options and make a choice on the one that will be the best for maximizing benefits for society and the environment. So we'll see that in the next step. So let's not get ahead, but that's a very good question. And when you say, how do they become average annual damage? So what you will have is having a look at all the different events that you had in the past. A lot of the times this comes from historical data, or if you don't have historical data, it will be from simulations. So you will know that in that case, your results are underestimating basically the value of agriculture. And you will need to know in the sensitivity, we will see in the sensitivity analysis what it is telling us about how our results are impacted by those underestimated values of agriculture. So we'll see in the next step. And here, the only one that is blank still is mining. So it's just because I actually want you to have a look at the information that is given to us, because sometimes you might find information just like this, for that is all you have to be able to actually complete or insert the data that the tool requires for performing the calculations. It say the value, this is on page 8. The value of the equipment at risk in the mining site is 7.8 million. And with that mitigation, large bushfires can destroy 20% of it every 30 years. So this is what we want to know. How much is destroyed every year? So I'm going to open my calculator here. And so you'll be able to see the information in the exercise and the calculator. And so if I destroy 20% of this mining equipment, so that's 7,800,000 times 20%. So basically, every 30 years, 1,560,000 of that equipment gets destroyed. But that's every 30 years. So roughly, if I divide this by 30, roughly on average per year, we could see damage of 52,000. This is very roughly, okay? It's just one event every 30 years that I'm accounting for. I'm not having a look at any other events. But roughly, this is the information that I have, and that's what I'm going to go with. There is a video series that you will have received information on, a video series where I have explained a lot of these concepts and how to convert damages per event into average annual damage for different assets, and for how do you go from that step from this is the damage per event to this is the average annual damage. So there is a series of videos on a lot of these concepts, and there is one where I show basically the technique and the calculations that you need to make to actually basically do this properly, to convert what we see in the data of bushfires damaging for different types of bushfires and how to convert that into average annual damage. So here, the damage is without mitigation is about 52,000, but we need to know how much of these, how much basically is the 52,000, but I cannot, in the tool here, I cannot put 52,000. Why? Because what the tool is doing, and you don't know this, but that's the reason I'm explaining to you, the tool would basically multiply, and we'll see this in the next, we'll see this in more detail a little bit in session 2. The tool will multiply this value for residential buildings, 450,000, times the 20, the count, actually, the 20 buildings that get destroyed. So it's multiplying the value of the asset times the number of that asset that are destroyed on average per year. So because we're multiplying, we need here something that we can multiply this 7.8 million multiplied by something here will give me this 52,000. And to find that, I only need to divide 52,000 divided by 7,800,000. And so that's 0.0067. So I'm going to write here 0.0067. And this is going to be then multiplied by the value that I have here, 7.8 million times this will give me the 52,000, that is the average annual damage. Now, click on the green button, results, and that opened my results page, results sheet. So now that we've inserted all the data everywhere, we can have a look at the results. So now let's click on this green button that says results. And now here we go, basically the tool in the background, you don't see exactly what it is doing. It's a little bit, it feels a little bit like a dark box at the moment, but next week we'll go on this into detail and you basically understand everything, how this is calculated and how this is calculated and how the internal rate of return are calculated. So the net present value, I think it should be called the present value of the net benefits. I don't know what economists will have to say about that, but I actually think the name doesn't exactly kind of tell you what it is doing. It's basically, we're having a look at the cost every year, in year 1, the cost in year 2, the cost in year 3, the cost in year 4, and the benefits in year 1, in year 2, in year 3, in year 4. It might be, cost might be, 1 million or 1,040,000, for some of the options in the first year, but the benefits are 0 because the benefits are only starting in year 2. And there might not be all of the benefits that are realized straight away. So we might have net benefits. So the benefits of year 1 minus the cost of year 1 might be negative because it's just the cost, and so on. So we continue with different years. And so for each year, we do the benefits minus the cost, and then we get net benefits. But we get it from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, year 4, year 5, and until year 30, because we told the tool, can you please calculate all of this for 30 years? We cannot compare the numbers that I have in year 5, for example, the net benefits of year 5 with the net benefits of year 30, because they are at a different time. So we need to bring them all to a common point in time. You can pick any really, but usually we pick the present, especially when we're doing analysis where we're looking into the future, we bring them to the present. Otherwise, you might choose a different one if you're doing a retrospective analysis, but that's another story. If we're looking into the future, but at least you just have to pick a year or a time that you bring all of those numbers into a common basically point in time. So that's where we use the discount rate. And at this moment, you don't see exactly how that is done, but later on, so we sum basically all the net benefits of all the years, but discounted. And so basically this is the sum of all the net benefits. So net present value gives me these results. So if I was going to rate my mitigation options, I will go first for the landscape burns, thinking these are the one that generates the highest benefits. Then the private fuel reduction is the next one. Then it's the wildland urban interface burns, and then the education. So I'm the same with the benefit cost ratios. The benefit cost rate net present value is basically the benefits minus the cost. So it doesn't mean that the benefits are necessarily bit higher or lower for any of this. At the moment, we don't know any of that. We don't have the detail. All we know is that when we do benefits minus cost, we get basically the net benefits being higher for this one than the others. This mine might have a lot more benefits than the landscape burns, but the cost might also be much higher. So that one might be the reason why it is actually giving me a net present value that is lower. The benefit cost ratio represents the value for money that you can get from each mitigation option. So it is basically actually telling you, if you invest $1 in this mitigation option, how much do you get in benefits? So if I invest $1 in landscape burns, I get $6 in benefits. If private landowners invest $1 in the private fuel reduction, they get $2.9 in benefits. So they are quite, in these two cases, you get significant benefits that are more than double, basically, your investment. Well, I'm guessing, yeah, there could be other possible wordings, even maybe better. But I usually use this is what the benefits that you obtain for each dollar invested in this particular option. So that takes into account all these assets that we have had a look here, It doesn't include any others. It doesn't include indirect impacts or non-market values. So here, for example, we haven't yet looked at non-market values. We will have a look at them in session 3. But if these results are given me here is $6 in benefits for each dollar invested in this particular mitigation option, that's only for the values that I have included here for the moment. But yes, it includes everything. Yes,
I'll just add, Vero, that I think in terms of benefit cost analysis, it's implied that it is, how many dollars benefit you get for dollars spent. And even when we integrate the non-market values, that's done in a way where you equate those non-market values to a monetary equivalent value. So benefit cost analysis tends to position everything in terms of dollars. When you use other types of analyses, you might talk about gains rather than monetary benefits, which might be another answer to your question.
Yeah, thanks, Abbie. Yes. For these two, they're a lot closer to 1. And so with the benefit cost ratio, we look that it is higher than 1, because if they are equal to 1, then we're breaking even. We're dividing the benefits by the cost. If it is equal to 1, it basically means that the benefits and the cost, the numerator and the denominator, are equal. So we're breaking even. The same for the net present value. If it is positive, it means that the benefits are higher than the cost. If it is close to 0, or if it is 0, it means that we're breaking even. And if it is negative, then it means that we are actually losing money. Also, the costs are way higher than the benefits. The internal rate of return is just simply information about at which point, for which discount rate, would my net present value be equal to 0. So at which point are we breaking even, for which discount rate? So if it is a lot higher than the discount rate that we inserted here, then we don't need to really worry about, because that means that for many discount rates that we try, this is going to still provide some benefits. If it is closer, like this one, to the discount rate that we inserted here, then we have to have a look a little bit more in detail as to, okay, what is happening here? with this particular mitigation option, and why is it actually kind of more breaking even, and is my discount rate appropriate for this particular option? And so here below is where you have the sensitivity analysis to the discount rate. And after we do this, we'll stop here. We'll just open the sensitivity analysis so you can look at it. But then we'll start with that in the next, we'll start with this in the next session to actually look at the sensitivity analysis. And so here you see how these are the results in red for the landscape burns, and how these curve basically, which is basically telling us what the net present value is for different discount rates. On the x-axis we have the discount rate, and on the y-axis the net present value, and it's showing us how it decreases as we increase the discount rate. So the higher it goes, the lower the net present value, but still it can go on for a very long time still being positive, because we know that for this particular mitigation option for the net present value to be zero, will have to be a 172% discount rate, which is far to the right. These ones are a little bit closer to the line, to the zero line here. So these ones we have to be maybe a little bit more careful about which discount rate we choose. For the landscape burns, it doesn't matter. And so here is the same. It's just showing the benefit cost ratio, the sensitivity of benefit cost ratio to changes in the discount rate. So there is a dotted line here. It's a little bit, it's not quite visible, but we will see it in other exercises. Is the break-even point, basically, is if my benefit cost ratio is equal to 1, I'm breaking even. If it is higher, so if the curve is higher for any mitigation option, I'm having benefits per dollar invested in that mitigation option. And if it is lower, I'm actually not having any benefits. I'm actually losing money, and the costs are actually higher than the benefits. Now click on the green button, sensitivity analysis. And here in this box, type 50%. So why 50%? Here, because I choose to, that's all. You can actually test another number. You can test 30%, 40%, 70%. Is the number that you think your values could be, how much they could change by, like they could maybe increase by 50% or decrease by 50%, or maybe less, maybe it's just 20%. So it's how much you think that these values here could change, the values that we have here in the values sheet. So what is this doing? I'm asking the tool, and we will have a look at the detail of the calculations, and we'll calculate a sensitivity analysis ourselves in session 2. But here is just an overview of what it's doing. What the tool is doing in the background is that it's basically going to each of these values and changing it by plus or minus 50%. So if I reduce this by 50%, so I'm reducing it by half, this value here, instead of being 450,000, will be 225,000. And so that's, in that case, I'm reducing it. So here in red, 50, reducing it by 50%. If I'm increasing it by 50%, is then this bar here in green. And what I want to actually see here in this graph is look at the bottom at the scale. So here it goes from 0, the 0 is the middle line, and it goes to minus 40% all the way to plus 40%. So basically here, if I change the value of residential buildings by either minus 50 or plus 50, then the net present value, so this result here, will only change by about, if I keep my mouse here, by about 5 or 6%. So the width, oh, it's like 6%, minus 6%. So there you go. That's handy. If I just kind of hover over the bar, the red bar, is basically telling me that my net present value is being reduced by 6% when I change the value here of residential buildings to 225,000. But I leave all the others the same. I'm only changing one at a time. Why do I want to do that? This is called a one at a time analysis. The reason I want to do that is just to be able to see if there is one particular asset whether it's a market asset or a non-market value, if there is one of them that changes my results, if there is one particular asset that when I change it, it changes this result by a lot. That's what I want to look for. So basically, I want to see how wide these bars go here. So if I increase the value of commercial buildings by 50%, my net present value increases by 16%. So what is that telling me? That if I increase the value of commercial buildings by a lot, my net present value increases, but by less than the change that I have done. So it's not 50%, it's only 16%. Here, if I change the value of plantation forestry, the value that I have here, the value per hectare of plantation forestry, then if I increase it by 50%, my net present value will then increase by 28%. And vice versa, if I decrease it by 50%, the net present value will decrease by 28%. So it is important to have a look at this scale. Now notice how the scale of different strategies, this is the wildland-urban interface burns. Notice how this scale is from 0 to minus 300 and from 0 to plus 300. So that means here that my results are a lot more sensitive. Here it only goes to 40. So even if I change any of them by 50%, the maximum that this bar can get here up to is 40, whereas here is 300. So what this is telling me here is that this particular strategy, wildland-urban interface, is very sensitive to changes in operation and maintenance cost. So when I change this operation and maintenance cost I increase my cost by 50%, if I increase them, then my net present value is reduced by 257%. It's almost divided by 4. So that's a lot. If it is minus 300%, that's a big change in my net present value when I change this operation maintenance cost. And that's often what happens in the literature for wildland-urban interface burns. And when you're doing prescribed burns close to build assets, close to human habitations, it is a lot more expensive per hectare because they tend to send a lot more staff, a lot more fire trucks, a lot more equipment, and a lot more resources to make sure and to prevent any escapes, make sure that there are no escape prescribed burns when they're really close to human habitations. And a lot of the times they tend to be quite expensive because of that. But any changes, and this is quite important to see, any changes in those costs could then change the results that I have here quite significantly. So it means that I want to be very certain about my estimation of these costs. How certain am I that I have good data for these operation and maintenance costs? If I have good data, if I trust my data and I'm pretty sure that it is good, perfect. All I know is that my results would change a lot if I change the operation and maintenance cost. But if I feel that I don't have really good data and I am a bit uncertain about what I have in my analysis for this particular parameter for the operation and maintenance cost, then this is telling me you have to go and collect good data, because your results change so much with this that you really want to be sure that you have good data for this particular parameter. For this information needs to be really good in our analysis. So the further out the bars extend, the less confidence you have in your results and the more information or accurate data you need for that particular value or for that particular item to make sure that you can trust your decisions. So if you're going to make decisions based on these results, you will possibly say, okay, let's do landscape burns. But what if the cost of wildland-urban interface burn is much lower than what you think? Then in that case, we'll be making a decision based on these results, knowing that for this particular
mitigation option, we cannot have much confidence in it unless we know that we have good data on it. Yes, if you have good data and you're 100% sure, well, 100%, I don't know if you can ever be 100% sure about any operational maintenance cost for prescribed burning. But if you have good information on this particular item and you're confident that the information you source is good and is reliable and is not going to change much, then you can have confidence in the results. Abbie, would you like to add something?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to point out that, bearing in mind this is a screening tool, and I think where the power of this tool comes in is being able to look at this. And if you know you don't have good confidence about one of those aspects that has a really wide bar on it, that's the thing that if you're moving to developing a full business case, that's where you really need to be putting a lot of attention and making sure that you go and collect that extra data. So this tool obviously is helpful in sort of forming some early decisions, but also in guiding you as to what you need to know if you're moving to that point of a full business case.
So that's for wallet under interface burn. Let's have a look at the other ones. This one goes from 0 again to 40%. That's okay. It means that, yeah, better have good data for commercial buildings than residential buildings. And maybe just check a little bit on the operational maintenance cost as well. But no matter what changes I make to the values that I have here and the parameters, for the cost, it looks like my net present value is not going to change that much. So this is what we say that the results are fairly robust. That's what is called robustness in the results, is that I can trust my results, almost like no matter what I change in these values or in my parameters, my results are kind of going to stay about the same. They're not going to change that much. So I can, have a high level of, I have a high level of not certainty, but a high level of confidence that these results are going to guide me properly in terms of making decisions. Now let's have a look at education. This is a very interesting one. Have a look at the scale at the bottom, from 0 all the way to minus 6,000, or from 0 to plus 6,000. This means that anything I change in this particular mitigation strategy changes my results enormously. So if I just simply change residential buildings, the value of residential buildings here, just by a little bit, this could mean that my results here could be, the benefit cost ratio could be much higher. The net present value could be much higher. So this is important because it's telling me that, okay, if I am pretty certain that the value of residential buildings that I have here in my analysis is fairly good, then that's fine. I am quite certain that this is good information that I have, and I can basically have confidence in my results. But if for whatever reason I actually have a little bit of doubt or uncertainty about a particular piece of information that I have in my analysis, then I have to just go on. It's telling me, go and collect more information about it. Your results are very sensitive to changes in this particular parameter, and are very sensitive, a little bit sensitive in this one too, and are very sensitive to changes in these parameters. So we want to actually go and collect more information about those. And what is important here is basically these results, this sensitivity analysis is telling us how to prioritize the collection of that information. It's telling me it's really important that you go and have first this one very right, and then maybe go and have a look at these ones, then go and have a look at the others, but at least start with these three that are really the ones that are changing my results by a lot. So that is basically a good piece of information that basically is telling us how much we can trust the results that we have. And if we are not 100% sure that we can really trust them that much, then what information we need to actually have a higher level of confidence in the results. So here is only one of the types. There are several types of sensitivity analysis, and I invite you as well to look at the video. In one of the videos in the video series that was sent in the email that you received yesterday with the material. This is one type of sensitivity analysis that is called one at a time. There are other types of sensitivity analysis, one where you could, instead of changing this residential value by 50 plus and minus 50%, you could simply say, okay, what is the minimum value that I think they could have? what is the maximum value that I think they could have, and then play with those two. Or you could also do another type of analysis that is called Monte Carlo analysis. So you do, you rely basically on distributions. And for that, there is it's more a statistically intensive analysis. And then, yeah, it requires a lot more information. But you need to know basically a lot about the distributions, but it's also a really good analysis to test here. So for these results, so here we rank this one first, and we're fairly certain that the results are, quite, we have a kind of attach a high level of confidence to these ones. This one will be the second, and we again can attach a high level of confidence to this. This one will be the third and fourth, but for these two, we have a low level of confidence in the results because of the sensitivity that they have to changes in different parameters. So then we need to know that for these two options here, we need to collect more information in order to make well-informed decisions for prescribed burning and for fuel reductions and education in this particular area.